When I woke up this morning, the last thing I was thinking about was writing an article celebrating Ishiro Honda's birthday. I'll be the first to admit I don't have a spreadsheet with every director and actor's birthday or movie release on my Google Drive, nor do I want to be that account where I'm filling up everyone's timeline with the same thing 50 other people have said. However, to say he's influenced my life is an understatement, and chances are if you're reading this, then he's done the same for you as well. That said, what follows is not comprehensive. One day I hope I can flesh this out more fully, but for the time being, this will do. I believe Ishiro Honda is a prophet, but not the kind of prophet most of us think when we hear that word. Growing up Mormon, I believe there was a prophet over the Latter-day Saint Church who received direct revelation and guidance from God himself. While I was never told I would go to hell for questioning him and his teachings, the implication is there. Disagree with the prophet, and you're disagreeing with God. If you aren't Mormon or even Christian, your mind might go to David Koresh, the infamous leader of the Branch Davidian cult. Unfortunately, that's a fairly common example. A religious leader who claims they are receiving some sort of divine wisdom to instruct their obedient followers in how to live, and more often than not, prepare for the end times. Simply put, according to Walter Brueggemann, the dominant conservative misconception, evident in manifold bumper stickers, is that the prophet is a fortune teller, a predictor of things to come, mostly ominous, usually with a specific reference to Jesus. However, this is not what I mean when I say Ishiro Honda was a prophet, and in the Bible, this wasn't the case either. Because they could have numerous and varying roles, it's near impossible to have a concise definition for what a prophet is. Ultimately, however, it's clear for whatever deity they worshipped, they were considered divine messengers. Their message could be confronting kings with their moral or religious misdeeds, or it could be calling a nation to repentance. Neither of these examples would be easy to stomach, which is often why prophets were driven away or killed. However, as Wybrey writes, insofar as they were believed to have an intimate relationship with God, they were feared. Even kings were unable to ignore them. More than this, though, a prophet could have the task of reminding the people what life could and should be. This is what Walter Brueggemann has dubbed the prophetic imagination, or, in his own words, the task of prophetic ministry is to nurture, nourish, and evoke a consciousness and perception alternative to the consciousness and perception of the dominant culture around us. Krista Tippett, a journalist and creator/host of the On Being radio program, summarizes it as such. Prophets help us connect the dots between the world as it is and the world as it might be. To me, this describes Honda's work to a T in various ways. However, as I mentioned previously, this is not meant to be comprehensive, so I'll bring up two of his films to clarify. First is the most obvious, 1954's Gojira, his first foray into the world of kaiju films. While I'd argue a large number of Americans have only seen the 1956 version, Godzilla King of the Monsters, Honda's original film is not shy in its condemnation of nuclear warfare. The beast himself exists and terrorizes Japan only because of the bombings. Content to remain underwater, Godzilla is believed to be a prehistoric creature, disturbed from its slumber, and thereby transformed because of the testings. We see our human protagonist torn by Godzilla's appearance. Dr. Yamane, played by Takashi Shimura, sees hope in Godzilla's existence. If he was able to survive the bombing, maybe there's a way to develop a cure for the radiation poisoning countless Japanese men and women were enduring. Of course, there were those who simply wanted to kill Godzilla without dealing with the implications his existence wrought. You also had Dr. Serizawa, who inadvertently developed a tool that could be used to defeat the monster. But at what cost? If something was capable of defeating Godzilla, what could this do in the wrong hands? To further analyze Honda's film, I think the authors of his biography put it best when they write, in Godzilla, Honda alludes directly and repeatedly to the war, the bomb, and the hibakusha, the survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Warplanes, tanks, and convoys are deployed. Artillery units shoot and depth bombs explode, depicted with real military stock film. The monster's onslaught is a slow-moving shockwave, its radioactive breath incinerating people, cars, and buildings. Mass evacuation is ordered. People huddle in shelters. A mother comforts her terrified kids as Godzilla nears, saying they'll soon be in heaven with their father. Tokyo's ruins unmistakably resemble photographs of Hiroshima's aftermath. A final plea of disarmament comes via the beleaguered Dr. Yamane. If we keep on conducting nuclear tests, it's possible another Godzilla might appear somewhere in the world again. Honda was far from an armchair ethicist, however. Serving on the front lines for several years, his service is what helped form his eventual pacifism. His experiences ended up being traumatic enough he was known to be fairly reserved, if not entirely silent, on the actual happenstances. According to the biography, the images of combat and destruction that would appear in his films were, in a sense, Honda's only real catharsis. Like so many veterans, he took his demons to the grave. Even as an old man, he was still awakened by horrible nightmares 2 or 3 times each year, his wife recalled. He'd see all of his friends in his dreams, all of those who died fighting, all standing in a line. The horror of war was with him until he died. Considering PTSD was not really defined until the 70s, in the wake of the Vietnam War, this is not surprising. When you look at organizations such as Iraq Veterans Against the War, they are not speaking against the violence from a passive sense. These are men and women who experience the horrors of war firsthand and know what trauma it can bring to soldiers and innocents alike. With this in mind, it's no wonder why Honda spent so much time discussing war and violence in his films. Sure, he was known for his slice-of-life flicks, and movies such as King Kong vs. Godzilla, while containing a biting criticism towards exploitive and consumerist practices, especially at the cost of innocent lives left in the wake of a greedy man's desires to boost his TV ratings, prove he was not always making the most political or controversial films. But if you went through what he did and felt so strongly about working towards peace and healing, would you not use every tool at your disposal to, as Krista Tippett put it, connect the dots between the world as it is and the world as it might be? This is seen most prominently, I feel, in the underrated 1963 film Atragon. I won't be going into as much detail here, but the movie deals with the clash of 2 ideologies, one of holding on to national pride to the point of unbridled violence, the other wanting to lay down their arms, that no nation should be more important or above another. This nationalism can be seen in both Jun Tazaki's Captain Hashiro Jinguji, a man willing to die for his country, and also the fictional empire of Mu and their plot to enslave the world due to their belief the rest of humanity is beneath them. However, by the end of the movie, Jinguji, faced with the parallel that is the Mu Empire, looks in the mirror, realizes patriotism has no value if others have to suffer as a result, and changes his ways. This description is reductionist at best. Much more could be said, but it's clear Honda, while sympathetic to his fellow veterans, has something to say to those who would still believe Japan to be superior to others, to those who would let patriotism define their identity. In Jinguji, Honda warned that in the Empress of Mu's willingness to die with her sinking country, her choice to die rather than change her ways, this was the road the Patriot, and countless others, were heading down. However, Honda was far from being a pessimist. It wasn't too late. The captain saw the error of his ways. But in the end, Jinguji proved to be a warning to keep an eye on the nationalism that was rearing its head once more. The same blind patriotism we all face in our own lives. So when we look at Godzilla, Atragon, or other kaiju films, there is a very real temptation to gloss over these details, and understandably so. Most of us started out watching Godzilla movies because we had a love or obsession with dinosaurs and monster flicks. This is only increased for those who have never watched a Godzilla movie, or their main exposure being entries like the campy Godzilla vs. Megalon. You can and should be able to watch these movies without having done the extensive research about Honda's life, without having spent countless hours studying 20th century Japan. But even so, when I watch a Godzilla movie, one that Honda directed especially, I cannot help but think of the ghosts he faced for decades, until the end of his life. The faces etched into his mind of friend and foe alike. I also think of how he took his experiences, his trauma, and channeled it into something greater than himself. How he took what was arguably a laughable genre of film, monster movies, and invited us to think about the world differently. He challenged us to envision a world where we lay down our hubris in the name of brotherhood and reconciliation. And in a day and age of endless wars in the name of spreading democracy, of worldwide pandemics and economic collapse, I welcome this prophet's voice. It assures me things do not have to be this way. It convicts me to take up the challenge and work towards a new reality. And it reminds me of another prophet, the one who rebuked his disciples for choosing violence instead of faith, the one who is compassionate to the ostracized and forgotten, even when it meant going against societal norms, the one who would rather lay down his own life and forgive instead of fighting back. Honda knew this world had too much violence. It was time for something different. I agree.